Okay, so I'm just going to briefly introduce myself. My name is Lenore Burkard. I am a multi-published author in 3 genres, award-winning. I'm a book coach and a very small publisher. So we're going to start with Linda. We have 3 writers. Linda Dindzans. Am I saying that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Linda is an MD, a retired surgeon, which is kind of really interesting. And she still has a heart of a healer. So her stories of redemption and restoration are set in the ancient days of the Bible. Very interesting, but ring true for readers today. Linda believes that only a profound encounter with Jesus, the Son of God, can transform people, whether her characters in a story or us. She's had a long-standing fascination with God's word, and she's also a speaker and educator. Then we have Paul Mascia. Did I say that right?
You did. Perfect.
I just have to talk like a native New Yorker, which I was for quite a long time. Okay. So Paul is a cum laude graduate of Yale University in religious studies. Congratulations for that. His book, Nazar's Journey. I'm sorry, I didn't mention your name, the name of your book, Linda, but we'll get to that. His book, Nazar's Journey, is set in the Nineveh plains of Iraq in 2014. That's during the ISIS era. Another very interesting era. And then we have Sandra Melville Hart, one of our hosts, I believe. So Sandra is an award-winning author, a speaker, and a conference teacher. And we will have a chance you will have a chance, all of you, to tell us a lot more about yourselves. So Linda, I'm going to start with you. Your debut novel, A Certain Man, is set in Samaria at the time of Jesus. So what can you tell us? What inspired you to write about ancient Samaria?
I think the original impulse comes from the title, because a certain man is a callback to several of the parables. Now, not every time that Jesus told a story did he introduce it as there was a certain man, but there, I believe, about 7 that start that way. And that was actually, Bible scholars believe that was actually a trigger for the audience to realize that he was telling a true story, that this person really existed. So that was the jump off point. Who is this person? What is the backstory of this person? Now, I don't want to give a spoiler as to which parables are involved, but there is obviously a parable involved in the storyline. So that was the start. And then ancient Samaria was just interesting to me because Jesus cared about Samaria. When you think about it, they were the 2 tribes that had fallen away from the other 10. And so Jesus is about reuniting the pattern of, restoration. So he's going to restore all the tribes, the 12 tribes. So when he went through Samaria, that was no accident. And at the end, when he gives the Great Commission, he says, go to Jerusalem, Samaria, and then the world.
That sounds really interesting. Never put together that there were 7 times when Jesus started a story that way. So thank you for that. I just want to quickly insert that I was wrong about Paul. He is not a Yale University graduate, but a Harvard. So I got that off the internet.
No, Yale.
Oh, it is Yale.
Yeah, I'm Harvard.
Did I say Harvard for you, Paul?
No, Yale is correct.
Okay. And Linda's Harvard. Okay, wonderful. So during your free time, Linda, I will get to each other. I understand you play pickleball. Is that with your family? And do you have any other hobbies?
I play pickleball with friends, and most often play with other women, and play 3 to 5 times a week. And it's been a wonderful break from writing, actually. I try to get up and write and then go play pickleball to take a break. And I have other hobbies. I sing, and my husband and I sing together in choirs. We're choir singers, and also love travel and photography.
Wonderful. You're doing a book giveaway. Do you want to tell us about that quickly?
Yes, the book is A Certain Man. It's set in ancient Samaria at the time of Jesus, and it centers around a couple that are separated through a suspicious murder, and the main character has to run for refuge. And it's the story of how they survive the struggle and reunite before either one of them meets Jesus face to face, before either one of them before Jesus sets the political and religious landscape on fire, and before either one of them is immortalized in the Gospels.
That sounds truly really interesting, fascinating, actually. And I can't wait to see how you bring Jesus in there. We're going to do more questions for all of you, but I'll just move quickly to Paul. Paul, your book set in the Nineveh Plains of Iraq. So what inspired you to choose that setting?
Well, there were several things that were going on. First of all, I did have clients who had been involved with 9/11. One of my clients died on 9/11, a young husband. And then I had another client, because I was in the business world and in the insurance world. I had another client who was in an adjacent building on 9/11. And when he came out from his building, he was traumatized by what he witnessed. So I was directly impacted by the events of 9/11 because of these clients. And then I've always kept an eye out for the news events about ISIS. There was at some point several years ago a genocide declaration. So all these things caught my attention. And then there was an interview that was on TV about how ISIS would paint the letter N on the doors of the Christians in Mosul. And they would paint the letter N to identify followers of the Nazarene, obviously Christians, as a way to target them. And they would either be punished financially or through harassment, or they would be killed. So I read about that, and that was for me the straw that broke the camel's back about wanting to write this particular story. I could also say a couple other things about it. I had written a story my senior year when I was at Yale about a boy in the Vietnam War. Okay, so that's going back a long time, the Vietnam War. And I thought about the story, and there's certain things about it that I really liked. And I thought, oh, it'd be great to kind of recreate this story in the context of a war that people were more familiar with. And so that started the whole process of the research about Iraq. And then there were just two other motivations. I did really had a desire to write. I had been in the business world. I have a creative side. I'm a musician. I compose and I play guitar and sing. So I have always had that element, but I wanted to write. And I wanted to also create something beautiful because I had read several theologians who talked about how beauty opens the soul to God. So I wanted to write something beautiful. So that's the background.
I love that. I just love that. I love how you chose your setting and that quote, "Beauty opens the soul to God." That's great. Your book features a 14-year-old. So would you call it for young adults? What's the perfect age in your mind?
You know, I'm finding this to be very interesting. I really wrote the book for adults, but the book is short. It's really a novella. So it's very easy for a young person to read it. And it's a little bit like the Narnia Chronicles in that an adult Christian, I want adult Christians to read it because I really do want to touch souls. I think that's the bottom line with this book. I do want to touch souls and open them to the beauty of faith. But having said that, a young person can read the book, a high school or college kid, or maybe a seventh or eighth grader, could also get a lot out of it. And maybe even a young man could be inspired because this is a male hero of sorts. I guess he's not a comic book hero, but he is a hero. So perhaps there's a real opening for young people to read this.
Okay. Do you know that young people do read it, or do you know if you've reached them?
Just beginning to test the waters with that. And
Okay. Mhm.
it looks very positive. Yeah.
Good. That's great. Again, we need good reading for young people. We talked about that on they talked about that on the YA panel.
Yeah.
All right, let me introduce quickly Sandra Merville Hart. We met once many years ago because we were both in ACFW. So Sandra, let's see. I said you were an award-winning author, speaker, and conference. So the book that you're featuring, and you have many titles. Congratulations for that. The book you're featuring is part of the Spies of the Civil War. So, what prompted you to write about the Civil War?
What prompted me to write about the Civil War was a memory. I mean, it's been something, a curiosity for me since I was a child. When I was about 5 years old, I had aunts and uncles in, and they were all sitting around the table talking about, the kids were playing, and they were talking about brother against brother and father against son. And I got upset. I was like, what are you guys talking about? And he said, oh, this happened a long time ago. And it was a terrible war, a big war. And my curiosity was just snared back then. So I have written several books, and what prompted me to be interested in the spies of the Civil War is while I was researching for other books, I kept finding out about spies on both sides, and spies that lived in the area, like in the Confederate capital and in the Union capital. Spies for the other side, they were right there by the heart of it, and they were throughout the country. So I decided I wanted to discover more about that, and it's been an eye opener. It's been fun.
That's great. So we really have three very different settings, historical eras. So this will be for all of you. If you could go back to the setting, the years of your story, would you want to? Why or why not? Sandra, do you want to answer that first?
Oh, absolutely. And yes, I would. I want to come back. I want to come back because this is where my husband is and my daughter, my family's here, my friends, but I want to go. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I
okay.
want to go because I am just so fascinated by that. And it was terrible time. There was so much happening. Courage, people, ordinary, everyday people had to rise to the occasion. And so courageous. I'd love to see Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address. I'd love to be on the outskirts of maybe Gettysburg. I don't really want to be in the middle, in trouble from the cannons and the musketry.
Yes.
But I would so love to go to Gettysburg. I'd love to go to Vicksburg, which is the location of Book 5, where a lot of stuff was happening. Oh, they had a hard time there.
Thank you. One of you other authors, what would you say about this?
Sure. I would say, like Sandy, I wouldn't mind visiting. I don't know that I would want to stay there. I think one of the advantages of historical fiction is it's probably the closest we can get to time travel.
Right.
It's well written, and you're drawn into that time period. And one of the things that I find fascinating about writing biblical fiction, and one of the reasons that I think it's worth trying if you've never read it before, is it does raise questions. I honestly don't know if I would have been a believer if I lived back then. I think maybe there's a reason why God had me born in this century, because to see the whole pattern of scripture, both Old Testament and New Testament, to me is evidence of the truth. And, I'm one of those people that needs apologetics and needs to be able to defend the faith. And so I think it's a fascinating notion, how would you have reacted if you lived back there? And also, I think it also can impact your prayer life if you put yourself as an observer in one of the scenes and say, what would I have thought had I heard this? Would I have been one of the people that when the sayings got too hard, I turned away? So that's And also, I believe that we will get to meet some of those people that we really want to talk to in heaven.
That's right. That's right. Great questions. That really puts you as a writer into the scene and helps you add to your story. And what would you say, Paul?
Well, the setting is really, to be honest, a horrific setting because all of these innocent civilians have to leave their villages behind and escape very abruptly, and they don't know if they'll ever go back to their homeland. So it is a very distressing situation that I think any of us with common sense would just avoid it, avoid it like the plague. But on the other hand, it's a way that the reader can step into that situation and begin to experience it. Those of us who have never experienced it can begin to experience it through the fictional experience. I suppose if I were to go back, what I'd want to do is bring comfort and healing to people who had experienced this trauma, which is so deep. I'd want to express my esteem or admiration for them. But I'd also, I guess, what I wanted to do was waken up people in the West that these are our brothers and sisters in Christ. These are people who have suffered greatly. We're geographically separated from them, but we are connected with them through our faith. So in any event, in all honesty, would I go back? No, it's such a terribly, terribly dark period of time. But would I want to bring hope or some message of consolation based on our Christian faith to these people? Yes, I would do that.
Love that. Thank you. Can you hold your book up so we can get a really good look at it? We've seen Linda's. She has it right there prominently. How can we get you? I'm seeing me big, not you. Say something, Paul.
Okay. So,
okay. There we go.
So what you have on the cover is Nazar, and you also have the skylark in the tree. And these are the two major characters of the story. Nazar symbolizing the human being in need of redemption, the broken human being in need of redemption. So in essence, we are all Nazar. And then the skylark symbolizing the beauty and serenity of heaven that we strive for. We cannot reach it ourselves. It's given to us as a gift through our Lord Jesus Christ. But anyway, the skylark is a pivotal player in the book. And so these two themes are right on the cover.
That sounds so interesting. A skylark as a pivotal player. I love that. Sandra, can you hold up your book for us so we can get a good look at it?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Oh, isn't that beautiful? Yeah. Sorry.
It's called River of Peril. It's book 5 in Spies of the Civil War. She has been in love with Luke since before he left for the war, and they were close. They were courting, and it was just expected that they would marry. So in book 5, I needed to give them a little bit of a I needed to put give him a problem. And he came in, she's a nurse, and she comes in early one morning and finds him in her ward. He is wounded. He's got a head wound, and now he has amnesia. He doesn't remember anything from the last 5 years, including meeting her. And he doesn't remember courting her. It's just a very difficult situation for both of them. But one of Luke's thoughts at one point was, there can be no future for a man with no memories and the woman who has them all. So.
Love that. It's a beautiful cover. Tell us, is that a standalone, or do people need to read the first 4?
It is not a standalone. I would read, if you can't read them all, I would read 1, 2, and 3 together, which are set in the Washington, DC, which is book 1, and in the Confederate capital, which is Richmond, books 2 and 3. Those are 2 sisters and a cousin. Book 4 through 6, we move to Vicksburg. They have different characters, and they have the heroines of 4, 5, and 6 are all friends. And I would read those in order because they kind of build on each other. I have written it so that if you only read one, you get a satisfying story. But if you will get to know the characters in each successive story better, and it'll give you more background and give you a more satisfying story if you read them all in order.
Thank you. And that, to remind everyone, is the Spies of the Civil War series. Linda, starting with you, what would you say the main theme of your book is, and how did you bring Christ into it in a way that can give readers a takeaway?
I think the main theme is it is possible to be certain. Faith. And what was the second part?
Do you have a takeaway that you hope readers will get after reading the book?
I think the takeaway is really, again, what I touched on before, which is that reading biblical fiction is a way to put yourself in those time periods, and hopefully that people will want to read the Bible, because biblical fiction, I mean, it's certainly historical fiction. I take great care not to add to scripture, but trying to write Jesus without making him a two-dimensional character, it's very important. When he's on stage, I don't add to what the Bible says, but when he's off stage, for instance, he stayed in Samaria for 2 days. There you can add the fiction, but I try very hard not to have him teach anything that he wouldn't have taught. I try to stay. So again, I think it's a matter of somebody being stimulated to, okay, how much of this is in the Bible and how much is not there, and maybe giving somebody a totally new view of a character. One of the problems is so many of the women in the Bible that we don't know much about. It was either presumed, like the woman who had spirits thrown out of her, demons, was presumed to be a harlot. There were many other women that were just presumed Salome, who danced for Herod. She must have had a backstory. I mean, what would make her do that? So it's just giving somebody another perspective.
Very fascinating. Thank you. Who is the woman on the cover? It's a certain man, but we see a woman.
Yes. The woman on the cover is Mara, and she's the main character.
Okay, thank you. Other authors, if you could quickly tell us what you think the main theme and takeaway for readers of your books are.
For my stories, I really want to take people back to the Civil War times and to let them know what was going on, what was happening then. I try to research from the time, go back to personal accounts, diaries, people who were there. Tell me what you were thinking, what you were feeling when this happened, and I want people to know what happened. But these are people of faith, and how did they deal with it? The prayer, the turmoil, the inner turmoil that they had. The courage that had to rise. I mean, in Luke's particular case, my hero in River of Peril, when he wakes up from his amnesia, he finds out he's been a Confederate soldier. He's not for the South. He is a Union man. He's loyal to the Union. How did that happen? So, and Felicity, his girl, she wants to do something to help out the Union. And so, they dealt with real struggles, and they dealt with danger, and to stand up for what you believe can be very dangerous. And that's the bottom line. It's dangerous. It can be very tough today. It was tough then. And it just kind of shows you how they handled it.
Thank you. Thank you. And Paul.
Okay, there's actually two different levels with themes. One is a more global theme or themes. For example, the theme of displacement. Now, I do have an artist from Iraq who did artwork. I don't know if you can see this, but this is like one of the artworks that shows a woman in great distress and shock. And so that's kind of like the theme of displacement, persecution, the whole experience of the wounds of war. So those are kind of like global themes that could relate to any reader in any culture. And of course, we know what's going on today. I mean, we see displacement, we see the wounds of war in current global situations. But because I'm a Christian author, I have woven Christian themes below the historical level. And this book lent itself to that very beautifully because Nazar and his father is Baba. So the theme of the search for redemption, the search to know God the Father and the Father's love, and our identity in God the Father is the primary theme. But there's one other theme too that I just wanted to touch on, and that is this is the theme of God's protection, even in very dire circumstances. This is the artwork from The Scene Under the Stars. And basically from Psalm 91, the theme is, he will conceal you in his wings. You will not fear the terror of the night. So the theme that even in dire circumstances, God is with us and can show us his love and his protection. So,
Thank you.
yeah, those are the themes.
Thank you. We're kind of getting late on time here. So is there anything you want to tell us about your families or do you have a favorite spot to write? And do they leave you alone to write, that kind of thing? We'll start again with Linda.
Well, I have 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren, and my daughter, we had a daughter and 2 sons, and then she had the three-peat repeat. She had a daughter and 2 sons. So we have great fun with them and their activities. And they live actually in Virginia, and we're in Wisconsin, so we have to travel back and forth frequently. I married a fellow physician, and to give you an example, we talk about opening image being so important. Well, the opening image for our marriage is that we graduated medical school one day and got married the next.
Wow.
It's gotten kind of that speed ever since. We enjoy choir singing and have had opportunities I sang with Bel Canto Chorus here in Milwaukee, which is an audition choir, and it's actually a secular choir. And we've done several tours with them. The last tour was this last July, where we sang in southern Italy. And then we were asked to sing at the Vatican. And we're able to sing the High Mass at the Vatican. So as I said, we're secular, so most of us don't know what religion the others are. Well, we had 12 of our choir members went up to take communion at the Vatican. So that was sort of fun to see who was, Catholic, and they were thrilled because they weren't expecting to be able to go to a High Mass. So we've just had, and then immediately following that, we got home, and my husband is Latvian background. And so every 5 years, there is a Latvian International Song and Dance Festival in North America. So we went to Toronto, and we were able to participate in a 1,000-voice choir, which is very interesting and gives you a glimpse of heaven, I think.
That's wonderful. Very interesting. Thank you. Paul or Sandra?
We have 7 grandkids and another grandkid on the way, and 5 adult kids, and they're spread all over the globe. Only 2 grandkids in Columbus, Ohio. Then we have 2 in Italy, in Rome, Italy. 1 in New Hampshire, 2 in New Mexico. So anyway, so it's a challenge for us as grandparents to get around to see them. but it's been rewarding. And we have the two here in Columbus that we have the constant contact with. So that's really special. So my wife and I both love classical music. And fortunately, in Columbus, Ohio, there's some great classical music. So we get to go to concerts, and the cathedral has some wonderful music, a great choir. I am still involved with music myself as a composer. I'm actually taking some pieces that I had written years ago, and they're being put into a format which is professional, and that means you're putting it into the computer and printing it out in such a way that if I die, my music will still be able to be played and sung. So, and my music, by the way, is based primarily on the Psalms. I love the Psalms. So that tells you a little bit about what I've been doing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Another musical person, a composer. Very interesting. And what about you, Sandra?
Well, my husband and I have a daughter together, and I have two stepdaughters and a stepson. They're three of them are married, and the other one is engaged. And between everyone, we have 8 grandchildren.
Whoa.
So it's a lot of fun and keeps me busy. And my husband is recently retired. We are the ones here, and he does leave me alone. I shut the door, I turn on the fan so that I don't have background noise, and I find that helps me to concentrate if I don't hear every little noise. And he is so good about letting me just concentrate, because if he comes in when I'm in the middle of writing something and asks me a question, or I have to leave, then it never comes back to me the same way. Do you see that? Like when I'm writing something, I'm like so focused. I have to finish my thought. If I do stop and then I go back to it, it just is always just a little bit different. And so I really appreciated that about him.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. So I know 2 of you are from Ohio. I'm from Ohio. Are we all Ohioans? All the authors?
I am.
You are. I am.
I'm from Wisconsin.
Oh, Linda's Wisconsin. I think you said that. I'm sorry. Okay, because Paul is Columbus. Okay, so do you have a favorite place to write? And do you have to be there to write?
I actually try to change up where I write. I'm actually next week, I'm actually teaching about prescriptions for Christian creatives, and talking about changing your position and moving around, because one of the biggest problems for writers is the head forward position. And by changing where you write and the position you write in, that can help with it. And so I write on my screen porch when it's nice. And actually, we've heated the screen porch so that we can extend the season of the screen porch. I write at my desk, but actually, I think someone in the earlier panel mentioned I handwrite everything first. And I'm a terrible typist. So I handwrite everything first, and then I transcribe it, type it into and do sort of a little edit as I'm going when I'm putting it in. And one of our fellow Sandy's and my fellow friends was laughing because when we were at the beach together, she realized and thought it was very quirky that I always write with purple pen.
Love that. Thank you. I don't know exactly how much time I have, but I hope we have time for.
There was a question in the chat. Someone wanted.
Sorry.
That's okay. Someone wanted to know, and I apologize if this was answered, but Linda, if this was your first book, and if you have others planned.
Yes, thank you for asking. This is my first book. I retired from medicine 12 years ago. I started to write a huge trilogy that got way out of control, and then set it down to do this. And I've been contracted to do the next 2, which are part of the series. So the whole series is called A Certain Future. This is A Certain Man. The next one is A Certain Mercy. And the third one is A Certain Refuge.
Perfect. Do the other, Sandra and Paul, do you want to tell us if you have a favorite writing spot?
Sure. I do write in my office. We are in my office, and when I am researching or when I'm writing a book, I have piles of stuff everywhere. So it's really convenient. I have my books, they could be open to the spot where I'm at in my story. The maps, they're out. And it's just a mess. But if I do love going away and writing, like on writing retreats with other authors, that has been such a shot in the arm for me, because not only do you have them, but I find I really get a lot done on these writing retreats. One time I got 33,000 words written in 1 week. That was tough. That was staying in my chair from early morning until supper. But I just find I can get a lot done when other people are around to inspire me.
That's wonderful. It makes perfect sense. And what about you, Paul?
You know what? Actually, I'm so glad that Linda brought up the issue of neck issues and shoulder issues, because I do tend to write sitting down. And I noticed on a website that there was an author, the author who did my introduction, he stands up when he writes, and he has like a table, that lifts up. And I thought, well, I really have to experiment more with that, because I'm very comfortable typing at a keyboard, and I'm very comfortable sitting down. But the more that you write, I find, because I'm not a young man, I'm older, obviously. I'm a retiree. So, the body is more sensitive to the neck and shoulder issues. So actually, I'm going to experiment. But I typically have been writing in my office. But I think actually, if I switch locations, I can stand up more. And I think that's going to be a good idea.
And standing is a great choice, and you can vary the level at which you sit. You can vary the level at which you stand. Standing also helps prevent, one of the big problems is people like Sandy, and I don't mean to be picking on you, Sandy, but people that like Sandy, if you sit and you don't move because you're so focused, which I could do too. I could sit there for 9 hours and really not twitch. Then you're at risk for a deep vein thrombosis as well. Mm-hmm. So standing helps also unfold your legs, allows more blood flow. When people stand, they tend to also move from foot to foot, which helps. So yes, anything you can do to vary position and get a little more movement is very important.
Yeah, and I love to swim. I love to walk. My wife and I go for walks together quite a bit. But still, the writing position is, because absolutely the three of us would be very captivated by our subjects, and you are captivated, and the time goes by, and
right. So you can imagine if you sit for a prolonged period without moving much for say 6 hours, that's like a long plane ride.
Yeah.
One of the other quick tips is just to wear travel socks. That will help too.
But Linda, I can't sit that long because you have to take little breaks.
Yes, and that's very important.
But it's true.
And I think time gets away from me. I mean, I set my watch to every hour and 15 minutes to just buzz me to make me get up.
That's good. That's good advice for everyone here, not just writers.
Right.
I think it's time to wrap up. Can Cindy tell me if we have more time?
We do have more time. There was a question for the whole panel. Any advice for those who want to write historical fiction, or how should they go about this in terms of research, which is always a big question with historical fiction?
Right. I would say the first thing that you need to do is read historical fiction. I mean, I read cross-genre. I read everything. I don't think I found a genre I didn't like, but I also, more importantly, never found a period of history I didn't like. I tend more toward the ancient Middle Ages, not so much close to the modern era. But I think reading it and reading a wide variety of authors is very important. And then with research, I think it's just very important to try to be aware of what you don't know. Because, for instance, when I was writing at one point, I wrote a scene that I showed to another biblical fiction author, Misu Andrews, who I love her work. And it involved a stoning situation. And she just wrote in the margin, because she was critiquing me, research stoning methods. And I'm like, well, didn't people just throw rocks at each other? You know, there were formal ways in which it was carried out. And that's a situation where you don't know what you don't know. So you kind of pray that you don't fall into those traps and create a speed bump for somebody. But it's very important to research the whole period and the culture. And I have a cultural Bible that helps give me clues. So.
Okay, so I would, if you're wanting to write about a particular period, let me just use the Civil War, since that is what I've been writing lately. If you say you want to write about, my book is set in Vicksburg. So I started out finding out as much as I could. I have a real good nonfiction book about Vicksburg and the battle. So I read and read several books until I find a really good one that has lots of background information. They might mention townspeople. They mention, they have good maps in them. And so there's going to be something that you find as you continue on and take good notes, that's going to be really helpful for you. And then that will help you to branch out. Oh, I want to know more about this. I want to know more about this detail. Go from there. But I would start out with a really good, some really good research, not books.
And my situation is a little bit different because I actually was able to talk with Chaldeans who had been through the experience. They were very significant in the creation of the story and what happened. I also had help with people who knew the language, which is a form of Aramaic. It's called Surith, who helped me put certain elements of the language in my story. I also had watched a National Geographic documentary, The Cave, about doctors in Syria. That was very influential in one of the scenes of my story. So it's a little bit different. I guess if you're dealing with a modern event, you actually can talk with people. And I was the people who gave me their personal stories, they wanted so much for their story to be told. And there was this feeling like they were being ignored or put, everything was put under the rug or forgotten about. And they just loved to be able to tell their story. So that was a unique element of historical fiction. I suppose somebody writing about anything that's happened in the last maybe 30 years, they would have that opportunity, to go back and talk with have firsthand recollections.
That is all very interesting. I wish we had more time, but we are out of time. Thank you, Lenore.
Thank you, authors. Thank you for sharing your talent, your gifts with the world, and your time today.